Let's face it, hiking can be expensive. From the cost of gear to food and fuel. It all adds up, but it doesn't have to be crazy expensive. And there are ways that you can save money so that you can go on trips more often or enjoy the ones you're planning. Today, I'm going to be talking about the cost of hiking and sharing 10 tips to help you save money when you're planning your next adventure. Now, I don't even consider this one an option, so I'm just going to get it out the way. And that's to go on less trips. If you don't want to spend as much money on hiking, don't hike as much. But seriously, this isn't an option. Don't do this. Probably the biggest cost that is stopping people from getting out hiking or on any sort of outdoor adventure is gear. Gear can be really expensive. And if you want to buy top of the line, super high quality stuff, then it's definitely going to add up quickly. But you don't need super expensive gear. Yes, it can be nice, but if you're just getting into it, or you're not quite sure what you're going to need, then there's no point in forking out a bunch of money on some super expensive brands. Instead, try to use what you've already got. Don't let it hold you back from planning an adventure. There was one time where I really needed to upgrade my trail runners. I had just thrown out my old pair, and the only suitable footwear I had for hiking was a pair of heavy leather boots. The trip I really wanted to do had a lot of river crossings, and I was sort of holding myself back because I didn't have the pair of footwear that I wanted. It was only an overnight trip, and I ended up doing it anyway with my pair of boots. I'm still really glad I went on the trip, and my footwear didn't hold me back at all. I was just letting myself think it would. So if you've got some gear that's still suitable for the trip you're going on, but it might not be exactly what you want, don't let it hold you back. Just work with what you've got. If there is some gear that you're going to need for a specific trip, but you're not quite sure if you're going to use it again, or it's just a one-time thing, then consider trying to borrow or rent it. Talk to friends and see if they've got something you can use, or try rent it from an outdoor store. It can also be a great way to try out different pieces of gear and see what works for you, instead of forking out a bunch of money and realizing that it's not quite right for you. So gear can be a great place to save money on your hiking trips. You don't need super expensive stuff to have a great time. Just get out there and enjoy it, and be safe. This might sound a bit funny coming from me, because most of my trips are solo, but hiking with others can be a great way to save money. If you're planning a trip with others, then they might already have the gear that you need. There might be a tent that you can all share, or someone's already got a stove, or like in my last tip, they've got something that you can borrow. Planning trips with others is not only a great way to save a bit of money, but you can also learn a lot as well, especially if you're hiking with more experienced people. You're going to be able to pick up tips and tricks and bits of knowledge that might help you on future adventures. And if you're trying to save money on gear, you might be able to pick some other people's brains to learn from their mistakes. Another advantage of hiking with people is that you can all carpool. Let's face it, unfortunately, the cost of fuel these days is really expensive, and our hiking destinations aren't always close to home. This can result in a lot of money being spent on fuel just trying to get to the start of your trip. By carpooling with others, it means you can split the bill on the cost of fuel. And if you're each taking turns with your cars, then you're putting less wear and tear on your vehicle overall, which can save you money in the long run as well. Although it's only been a few times, whenever I've carpooled with mates to go on a trip, it's always been a nice surprise when the cost of the fuel is way lower than expected. I've had trips where it's only cost me $20 to go away for the weekend. Now that's a nice feeling. Now talking about carpooling and the cost of fuel, another good idea is to try plan your trips closer to home. A lot of us don't take advantage of the locations that are near us. We want to plan trips to far-flung places and go to some really cool locations. But if you're fortunate enough to have some hiking areas near you, then definitely take a look at them and consider planning some trips around those. It means you might be able to save some money because you won't be traveling as far, and you might be able to get out a little bit more frequently. The trips might not be as big or as grand, but you're still getting out and getting some experience under your belt. Choosing less popular hikes is also a good way to save you some coin. Here in New Zealand, for example, we have our Great Walks. Now these hikes are in beautiful locations. You'll get to see some stunning scenery along some well-maintained trails. But the downside is that they do cost a lot to go on. You've normally got to book in advance, and some of them you have to arrange transport options with tour guide companies. These types of hikes can have a lot of options for where to stay, and the cost can quickly add up. try choosing some less popular or less well-known hikes. There are still plenty of tracks that are just as beautiful, if not more so, than some of the very popular hikes, and they come at a significantly lower cost. Our hut network here in New Zealand is a really cool opportunity for people to stay out in the backcountry. By picking less popular hikes, the cost of the huts and campsites will be cheaper, and you're not going to have to try fight your way in to booking a spot. Take some time, do some research online, pore over some topo maps, or talk to others. You'll be surprised at the number of beautiful hiking adventures you can have that are off the beaten track. Now, another option to make your hikes less expensive is to try camping rather than staying in huts or refuges. A lot of times I can find a good camp location that's totally free or significantly cheaper than the cost of a night in a hut. When I was doing the Tour de Mont Blanc in Europe, the cost of a refuge or chalet for the night would have ended up being anywhere from 50 to 80 euros. Instead, I was able to get a campsite for a fraction of that price. By choosing to camp, you're not relying on a structure or a building that's being maintained by someone, so your cost is going to be significantly cheaper. Is it going to be as comfortable as staying in a nice hut or refuge? Well, that's debatable, but it can feel a lot more freeing and definitely feel better on the wallet. Personally, I love to camp, and I normally always try plan my trips so that the option to pitch my tarp or tent is there. I enjoy it much more than staying in a crowded hut with a bunch of other people. But everyone has their own preference, and it's up to you how you want to spend a night in the backcountry. Just bear in mind that camping out is pretty much always going to be cheaper. Choosing to hike in the off-peak season, when the weather might not be as good, or the temperatures might be a bit colder, can also save you some money. For example, in the South Island, we have the beautiful Nelson Lakes National Park. Now, if you want to go hiking during the high season, in the height of summer, then you're going to have to pay quite a bit for each of your campsites or hut locations. During other times of the year, when it's not as busy, you can actually get away with the Doc's campsite pass. And if you're staying in a lot of huts throughout the year, then this can save you quite a bit of money. But unfortunately, you're not going to be able to use this option during the high summer season in somewhere like Nelson Lakes National Park. So this will vary from area to area, but generally going in the off season is going to be a lot cheaper. And there will also be less people, which some of us prefer. It can be surprising how the cost of food for your hiking trip can increase your total amount. There's tons of options for specialized hiking food out there, from fancy bars and snacks to freeze-dried food that all it requires you to do is pour water in a bag and eat straight out of it. Now, things like freeze-dried meals can be very convenient, and they can taste really yum. You don't have to deal with any of the hassle of cooking or even the cleanup. You just boil some water, throw it in the bag, and you're good to go. But this convenience does come at a significant cost. I'd be hard pressed to find a freeze-dried meal for anything less than $15. By going to the grocery store, I can find cheaper options than the cost of a freeze-dried meal. They might not be as yummy or as nutritious as some freeze-dried options. For shorter trips, or if you're on a budget, going to the grocery store can be a good way to save yourself some money. There's tons of options, from pasta packs to instant ramen. You can mix and match things and make some pretty yummy meals from just the grocery store. You don't always have to buy specialized hiking food just to go on your trip. If you really want to get creative, then trying to dehydrate your own meals can be a great way to save money as well. Now, this tip might be a little bit out of the box, but you can save some money by incorporating hitchhiking into your adventures. A lot of tracks have different start and end points. There are plenty of companies out there that will happily shuttle your vehicle around to the end point so that it's there when you finish your trip. But that comes at a cost. Instead, see if you can hitchhike back to your vehicle. No, it's not as reliable as paying someone to take your vehicle to the other end of the track, but it can add a bit more adventure to your trip. I've done it multiple times. I've started at one end, finished at the other, and then hitchhiked back to my car. Sometimes it's taken a little bit longer and I have had to walk maybe a few extra kilometers, but it has meant that I've never had to pay for a shuttle service. I personally find it a really fun thing to incorporate into my trips, but I totally understand that it might not be for everyone. My last tip for saving money on your hiking adventures is to do the trip faster. Now, I'm not saying you have to run the trip or go super ultra light, but a lot of multi-day hikes are planned at a pretty leisurely pace depending on your fitness level. I find there's always an option to shave off some time by making your other days a bit longer. Hiking faster can save you money because you don't need to spend as much on food. You're going to be out there for a shorter duration of time, so the amount of food you're going to need is going to be less. which means less money spent. You're also going to spend less money on things like fuel for your stove and hut or campsite fees. It's pretty obvious, but the more nights you spend out there, the more money it's going to cost you overall. Now, I'm not saying you have to try to do every trip short and fast. It can be really nice to take your time and just soak it all in. But if you are on a bit of a budget, then doing it a bit quicker will help you not spend too much. Last year when I was in Europe, I did the Tour de Mont Blanc in 4 days. I was never going to be able to afford it if I had taken the normal 10 days and stayed in refuges or chalets along the way. Instead, for the 3 nights I was out there, I bought all my food from a supermarket beforehand and camped along the way. I managed to save a lot of money and was still able to complete this amazing adventure. So those are my 10 tips for saving money on your hiking adventures. Especially when you're just getting into it, the cost can seem quite scary. You can put a lot less strain on your wallet and still have a really good time. You might even find you can get out on trips more frequently or plan some bigger adventures that never would have been in the budget. If you have any more tips on how you save money while out hiking, I'd love to read them down below. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.